Hello there, it's Tommy here, and welcome to the Politics Show here. This is Friday night, it's the 13th of 9, 2013, and we are going to talk about food banks. First of all, I just want to thank you to iHeartRadio, who has approved the Politics Show into the iHeart scheme, which is absolutely fantastic. And a big thank you to Spreaker as well, who's obviously kind of giving us the plan that we're on now, which is a kind of station type plan. We really appreciate that, and thank you to both those organisations who do great work, and certainly give everybody the opportunity to have a platform for freedom of speech and expression and other means of kind of entertainment as well, like playing music and just having talk shows and so on. So a big hat off to them, and I really think that they are the new and up and coming big internet forums, kind of platforms for people who want to get things out there, because there is other things like YouTube and that were big at one time, and they maybe have become too commercialised. Is that fair to say that about YouTube, who do great work as well? So it's nice to see you have got organisations like Spreaker and iHeart coming through, and being not as intense with commercialism as the other kind of sites have become. So it gives people like myself and yourself that's listening, if you take part in these type of shows, music or talk or politics and so on, it gives us the opportunity to actually be us without much interference, and as long as we can conduct ourselves in an orderly manner, then we're fine. So big thank you to iHeart and Spreaker for that lovely approval. Thank you so much indeed. And the Politics Show and all the fans listening, I'm sure appreciate it as well. So thank you from them as well. Now we're going to talk about food banks, and it's really because I was watching the Prime Minister's questions, and they were talking about economy, and it was only the British economy they were talking about. But we know that the economy isn't just Britain, it's also the whole world, and the rich are getting that a wee bit richer and the poor are getting that a wee bit poorer. You always had that kind of class division in the past, and it seems to be there's more billionaires getting created, not so much more millionaires, but more billionaires getting created. And what that's doing is it's taking people into that super rich league. Like you've got Abramovich, who owns Chelsea, or still owns Chelsea, who's got his yachts. You've got maybe the Apple guys who have really became massive billionaires as well. Steve Jobs was worth 8 billion, 8.3 billion I think it was the last count. So you know that there is a lot of people out there, and then you've got the Mexican person, I forget his name now, but he's like into the kind of metals and coal and industry and a bit of electronics too, technology. He's worth about 50 something billion. You've got Bill Gates, obviously Microsoft, who's now putting his money into Africa to cure polio and various other things. You've got him kind of worth 50, maybe 60 billion now, maybe even. And you know, these guys are like a different league for anybody. And I know the sociologists kind of put the kind of measurement on it in percentages, as 6% of the world is rich, and the other 94% isn't rich. And the reason for that is because the wealth, they have a good way of creating wealth. Capitalism is a good way of kind of churning itself. And if once people begin to understand how capitalism works and how you can actually achieve anything if you're given the right environment and so on, and the right things to work with to a certain degree, you can actually create yourself as much money as you want. Now, Bill Gates would say capitalism is the best system ever, whereas somebody maybe in Africa would say no, it's not, because you know Africans are Africa governments, a lot of them African governments are still paying the West a debt. And if you remember, that debt was raised by people like Bob Geldof, who incidentally is rich himself, but he's willing to take that kind of leap and you know, a leap of faith towards trying to create a better place. Despite his own kind of good fortune, he's happy to go and take time and try and give other people the opportunity to have some good fortune. And that good fortune might just be the form of food, water, clothes, shelter, you know, but certainly giving people the basic first order material needs that they need to actually get their society, environments, their countries into some sort of working order, so that they become entities in their cell that can actually become part of the mechanism that is capitalism. And the mechanism that is capitalism doesn't always go down well in other countries. Like Russia had the communist era, and you've got other parts of the world like Cuba and that, as we talked in past shows about, who have got this communist era as well. So you know that they're still in some countries are still in that mode, and you get the bits of career as well doing that. So there's pretty much, there is a lot of hardship in the world. So the capitalistic model doesn't always work in the countries that have got. Romania is maybe an example as well. They don't have what we have. But even at that, we don't have a lot either, because if we go back to this 6% richness, there's a percentage, maybe 7% now, because it does increase obviously. If the 6% get everything and they've got most of the wealth, then the rest of us have got nothing. So no matter how much we interact with the capitalist system, we're always going to know or not achieve the potential that these other guys have done, because they've took most of the wealth already, which would explain in some sort of way why it's so hard to make a living these days, why the economy is in crisis in a global capacity, why. And you can't just really always blame the bankers, because this is a globalised effort towards trade and buying and selling. Basically, the trade is the oldest ways of doing things since the beginning of kind of money or coins or tokens to actually in exchange for goods. So the trade part of it, is making these big companies money, and it is the system we all agree to. The byproduct say is that 94% is a no or not got any money, and we could perceive richness or having money as millions and billions. Some people are quite happy having maybe £10,000 in the bank and can live a very comfortable life on that. If they go out to work every day and they've got that wee nest egg there, they can actually do very well. The problem we have at the moment is people don't have that opportunity to get that amount of savings away. Although the propensity to spend, i.e. the amount that we have extra that we could spend, people will try and save because they don't know where the next money's coming from. And even though interest rates, for example, in the UK are quite low, at one time they were quite high, and that actually was good for rich people and savers especially. They maybe get a 5 or a 4% return on their money. So somebody maybe with 50,000 maybe get 2,000 or 3,000 a year interest. I mean, it's pretty much a decent wee system that. But I mean, at the moment the interest rate is at 0.5, I believe, in the UK. So you're pretty much only going to get a lot of your money there, and maybe that's why a lot of the money leaves the country as well and goes to other places. So where the food banks come into all this kind of build up to what we're talking about here is, if people don't have the money to spend and do try and save some but not getting a lot of interest on it, and they need to maybe even tap into that money occasionally, so the propensity to spend, that means the much they have extra to spend, not disposable income, but the amount they can spend and can actually spend at their leisure becomes less. And if you get a family of 4 or a family of 3, and you've got a mortgage rates is kind of a little bit higher, or your rent's going up, and the price, everything's going up, food, clothes, fuel, all the rest of it, then the wages aren't going up. And we're talking about the UK and specifically here. Now we're talking about UK and how its kind of mode's going now. Then pretty much you're not got that propensity. You don't have that margin to spend extra and buy extra surplus. And this is what's been happening. It's been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking to the point where people might have an income, but the bills are so much, the cost of living is so high, they really need to go and ask for that wee bit of extra help. Putting as much time as they put into a workplace, could be 40 hours a week, 35 or 37 hours a week, they're not getting the return they need to actually survive or function within the economy that they live within. So i.e. the environment that they actually partake in becomes a more desperate place to survive in, and their survival mechanisms, survival mode, become more innately driven because they have to stay alive. And if the job isn't keeping them alive, if the money they get from that isn't feeding the family and paying the bills in full, with that propensity left to spend, then they actually have to ask for secondary help, which is i.e. a food bank. And the food banks are great. And the latest thing we saw on I was looking at the politics kind of question time, Prime Minister question time, and it was basically saying, it was Andrew O'Neill that was doing it, Andrew Neil, and it was basically saying that there was 50,000 food banks in Britain, and now there's 350,000, and that's under the present Conservative government and Lib Dem government. And you could blame the governments for that, but you do have to think, well, Labour, who were a government before, allegedly, because we don't really know the facts of this, put us into such a deep hole of debt that we then have to get ourselves out it by cutting everything, reducing spending, all the rest of it. And that is why the reason you could argue, well, the Tories and the Conservatives obviously and the Libs would argue this, that the reason for that happening, these rising food banks, is because of the debt they inherited, and they have to tackle that debt. Therefore the food banks and the rise of them is actually the Labour government's fault from the new Labour era. Now, whether you believe one or the other is up to yourself there, because it's obviously to your interpretation. But what's for certain is Britain, that used to be the 6th richest country in the world, and it can't be far off that now again, and our citizens are going to food banks. Now, I don't know the morality of that. You know, I really don't have a judgment on it, if that is a good thing or a bad thing. It's a good thing, it keeps people alive, but does it keep people dependent on staying alive through a food bank source? And does it put a criticism on our capitalistic system where it maybe no longer is functioning for the need of the people? And as Jeremy Bentham would say, if they bring the greatest happiness to the greatest number of folk or people, you know, is that actually happening in today's society? Is a utilitarianism actually taking place? Is the freedom that we're meant to have in the UK? And I must say, I know that America is the same. I remember reading the things about the American children go to school for the meal. I mean, go for the education, but also going for the meal they get there, because that is the only meal they get a day. And that was millions and millions of American children like that. And they were actually reporting that, and the source was the BBC, I'm sure, and they were actually reporting that the children are eating rats, the family are eating rats at night time, and the food banks there are really sprouting up as well. And you got to think, what a shame that such developed countries that are inspirations in some way or another, and also the kind of world's police to some way or another, and Syria is an example of that, would actually let their citizens suffer like that. The fact that they actually would say it's okay, things will be better soon. I mean, how could they actually make that happen? Why would they actually just allow that to happen? So food banks could be a good thing, because they address a problem, an issue that governments don't seem to be able to address and solve. And that problem, that solution, the solution to that problem, as I say, is we need more money in people's pockets for them to be able to buy and fend for themselves and be able to self-sufficiently be citizens that can proudly walk into a shop and not have to ask about the price. And if the price is too high on something, should it actually be getting sold in the first place? So I really think that we as a country need the food banks. Yeah, I think I have a conclusion there. We need food banks. Whether you're rich or poor, we should be interacting with them. If you're rich, you should be maybe giving to them whatever you can, a couple of tins, whatever it may be. Doesn't need to be a lot. If you're poor and you don't have it, you should be going to one and maybe getting some help from them, so that you can maintain yourself for the better times that's meant to be ahead. Yeah, we keep getting told that. And I think governments have to open their eyes, because they have their eyes shut quite a lot, the blinkers on, and these blinkers are okay if you have a focus on something and you don't want distractions. But they're not okay if you know fine well that the people around about you are suffering, and you put the blinkers on to avoid yourself looking at what that suffering is. And I use the word suffering a few times there simply because people just are not making it. They are just not making it, a lot of people. They're just not getting by at all. And I believe that the message for this show is we should all help towards trying to help others. And food banks are a great way of doing that. And I would probably suggest, as someone who's actually helped set a food bank up before in the areas that I deal with, and one of them, part of that was for students as well, I would suggest that whenever we see these advertisements for donations for food, and if we have cupboards that would be food that we never use, like tins of peas or whatever it may be, we should donate. We should go away, we should get them and go back with them and help our fellow citizens. And if you're listening all over the world, I've obviously put a wee bit of America talk into it, I put a wee bit of UK talk into it, all over the world. I mean, if you don't have a food bank and you think people are starving, hungry, desperate, need help, why don't you maybe think about helping them? Why don't you look at setting something up and, you know, giving that wee bit of hope to someone who maybe think it's the end of the road for a lot of things. So food banks, in my opinion, after saying all of that, I believe are a very positive thing for community, a very helpful thing for an individual person, and something that really shows the whole human spirit of humanity and decency, and it's very dignified to actually be able to help another human being. It's one of the hardest things we could ever do. In the last show we talked about Syria and how World War III would come about and all the rest of it. In this show, it's about how could we help our fellow person next to us, the people that need our help, and how do we actually network with people who actually do have more than enough, and network with them so that we could actually have that rapport that would mean they wouldn't have to be asked every time. They would know just to give in the first place anyway, and give enough because they have a propensity to give. And that's kind of the food bank thing we're doing today. That's what we've talked about. I hope that maybe kind of has some sense in your head, or gives you ideas, or inspires you in some way. It's certainly, even talking about it over the show here, it's opened my eyes a wee bit as well, because I'm beginning to see that I know lots about it, and I'm already getting ideas how I can maybe improve the things I've already done. So it's certainly inspiring for me as well. And my message is, if people do, and it always my opinion, you know, obviously you judge for yourself, but if people do think they need some help in a food bank, you should go. And in Glasgow, for example, there's a Trussell Trust, and I believe that they do food banks all over Britain. And what they do is they go into areas, maybe they link up with a minister and some public people, like maybe a councillor and then a housing officer, and they sit around tables eventually, and they talk about how they're going to go about setting up. And the Trussell Trust has a kind of starter packs, and what happens with starter packs is you look through it and it tells you step by step how you should go about setting a food bank up, because they've set out hundreds of food banks, so they have. And then what's able to happen is you're able to get the thing going after a few months, and the Trussell Trust would like prop you up, and kind of help you out there. Let's get the website of the Trussell Trust. I'll just bring it up on the computer. I'll show you where to find it. And I've set one of these food banks up myself. Well, in some fashion I've got the ball rolling, and the Trussell Trust is who I use, so we're going to put them in now. And thank you very much for listening to the show. There we go. Thank you very much for listening to the show, and I hope that there's some good information in it. Right, let's go to this bit now, and we'll just see. So we've got Trussell Trust Food Banks Projects, and we'll give you the URL of that. It's www.trusselltrust.org/foodbank-projects. www.trusselltrust.org/foodbanks-projects. And I'm going to the website right now, and you can see 13 million people now live in the poverty line. It says every day people in the UK go hungry for reasons ranging from redundancy to receiving an unexpected bill on low income. And it's all about low income folks, it really is. Trussell Trust food banks provide a minimum of 3 days of emergency food and support to people experiencing crises in the UK. In 2012-13, food banks fed 346,992 people nationwide. Of those helped, 126,889 were children. Rising costs in food and fuel combined with static income, high unemployment and changes to benefits are are causing more people to be basically come to food banks. What a great website. So you can check that out, www.trusselltrust.org/foodbanks projects. Good luck with that, and if there's anything that maybe you've been through yourself and you want to comment on it, within reason. I mean, we don't like to comment on like things that you maybe personal things and so on, but whatever you feel comfortable with. If you want to put something in the politics show wall, that'd be great. Yeah, and if you're on iHeart and you want to comment on the show, feel free to use the comment boxes there as well. And thank you so much for listening. And I've been Tommy, and this has been about food banks, and I hope it's really been useful to you. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to iHeartRadio and Spreaker again. Thank you, and I hope we do you justice. Yes, hope we do well with the shows. See you later.